Hey guys, guess what? The entry draft is now complete. Now we're looking forward to free agency. Okay, guys, we are back. And it is just me once again in this episode. And in this episode, I am going to be recapping the entry draft mainly, going through lots of trades. And probably at the end, I'm probably just going to glimpse a little bit into free agency. I feel like I kind of already did that when I made the episode of how this team can get better because mainly the players that I was talking about were players heading into free agency. A few of them were obviously trades, but the main point was just free agency type of players. So, yeah. First things first, though, is I have a great partnership with SeatGeek. You get $20 off of your first purchase if you use promo code Caniac Report. It's all one word. It's a great deal to and great code to use, obviously, if you want to save some money on a comedy comedy event or a concert, whatever. Really, it is great to use. And also letting you guys know, this Friday is July 4th, so there's not going to be an episode coming out on July 4th, but we'll resume a week from when this episode is released. So, no episode on Friday, but I will be back for July 7th as I will be recapping free agency in that episode. So, the entry draft, so I'll say one thing about the entry draft. It was the first decentralized draft. And I would say this when it comes to the decentralized draft. This is just my opinion, but from actually watching it, I did not think it was good. I just didn't. I thought it took way too long, both day one and day two. And yes, I am that type of guy that will watch both events, both round ones and round 2 through 7 to completion. And yeah, it took way too long. And to me, though, honestly, I again, just my opinion, but to me, the weirdest thing was that the fact that the event had the players go into a big screen like room and talk to the general managers. And I just thought that was just so weird because it's like they're looking up. And for those of you who are watching, it's like me looking up right at a screen and not looking at you. So I just thought it was just really, really weird. I was at a live stream with Brandon from the Morning Take during that event. And what's funny is that we kind of called it the Imperial Throne Room because at one point I wouldn't be surprised if one of those players was like, "What is thy bidding, my master?" Hence the Star Wars reference. If you did not get that, if you didn't, I'm a little bit disappointed, but that's okay. Not everybody loves Star Wars, but I am going to get to quite a few stuff. I'm not going to report on every trade because a lot of these trades were like trades involving just picks, but I'm just going to go through the big stuff here. And I I did wait. I'm actually recording this almost the night before the this episode drops because you just never know what's going to come out, and quite a few things did come out today on Sunday as I'm recording this. So first things first is Florida re-signed Sam Bennett to an 8x8 deal. I think that is a steal considering that there were rumors of teams wanting to sign this guy up to $10 million. And I do not think Carolina. I don't think Carolina was one of those teams, but if they were, I honestly wouldn't be shocked as well, just because ever since that Rantanen trade, anything can happen with this team. But I think that's a great contract for Sam Bennett. I think that raises more questions on what's going to happen with Aaron Ekblad and Brad Marchand. From what I am hearing, it seems like Brad Marchand might be staying and Ekblad might be going to free agency. And if he does, If I was Carolina, I'd be going to Ekblad like, what do you want? Obviously, I'm not going to give him a blank check, of course, but I think if he wanted like a contract that's like probably around in the $7 million range, I'd do it. I really would. I probably wouldn't go over 8, but if it's $7 million, and it, of course, he has to agree because he's in full power. But if you can sign him for about like around 7 million, or I would say probably just like less than 8 million, I think that's a win for the Hurricanes. So we'll see how Florida does come free agency because they do still have those two players left. Another thing too that happened is the New York Islanders, they made a big trade with Montreal. They traded Noah Dobson to the Canadiens for uh, the Canadiens' 2 first-round picks that they had, the 16th and 17th picks, and a prospect in Emil Heineman. What's funny is that Heineman is a prospect that's already been traded quite a few times. And Montreal, when they got Dobson, he was signed to an 8-year, $9.5 million contract. So that is a big contract for a guy that does produce quite a bit of offense, and he's young. He's 25 years old. So we'll see how he does in Montreal. And for those of you who don't know about like behind the scenes stuff with the trade, Dobson kind of did want to go to Montreal. And another thing too, another trade happened when it came to Anaheim, because this is a team who has been linked to us to getting John Gibson. Gibson trade rumors have been going on literally feels like forever. But Gibson was actually traded to Detroit for Mrazek and a second round pick in 2027 and a fourth round pick in 2026. So Detroit is obviously trying to get better. I don't know how better they're going to get, honestly, in my opinion, because I think Mrazek was a decent goalie. And Gibson, well, I think he's a good goalie too. I just don't know how much margin that creates for them to get good. So we'll see how Detroit does with Gibson as their starter. Obviously, Gibson, he wanted to get traded. He kind of does. Anaheim's goalie is going to be probably Lucas Dostal, a young goalie, and Mrazek kind of helping Dostal out. I think it's going to be a good combination probably for Anaheim. Again, I just don't think it moves the needle a ton for both teams, but I can kind of understand it just because both teams are wanting to get better. And maybe a change of scenery helps. That's the thing with these goalies is you just do not know. Another thing too that did happen, and we're getting to the re-signing phase now. So I already talked about the big trades and all that stuff. Um, Columbus actually did get a trade recently, I believe, with Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood. They traded, I think, Gavin Brindley and a couple of picks to Colorado. I kind of thought that was a little bit of an overpayment from Columbus, in my opinion, from Don Waddell, our former GM. But we'll see how that trade does for both teams. But now there were a few players, especially today, as I'm recording this on a Sunday, that got signed to big contracts. Starting with Calgary, they re-signed Kevin Ball to a 6-year contract worth $5.35 million. I think that's a pretty good contract for a guy who's obviously a very big, good mobile defenseman. So good job for Calgary for getting that contract done. Columbus, they re-signed Dante Fabro to a 4-year contract that was worth $4.125 million. And again, I think that's a good deal too for a guy. He shoots right-handed, and Fabro does, but I think he's a good top 4 defenseman. He wanted to be traded to a team where he could get a little bit more ice time, if you remember his time in Nashville. So he got traded to Columbus. And then just a few minutes ago, before I started recording this, Matthew Nyes resigns with Toronto to a 6-year, $7.75 million contract. I thought it was going to be a little bit higher. So I think that contract is a win for Toronto management because Matthew Knies, he scored, I believe, around 30 goals. At least I think 30 goals this past season. And if you can get a guy under, I would say 8 million for Toronto that's scoring at that rate, I think that's a huge win for Toronto. So I think that is a great signing. I think it's a lot better than the signings of the original core four with Matthews, Nylander, Tavares, and Marner. So really, I really do think that's a win for Toronto. So now I'm going to talk about the Hurricanes here when it comes to the draft. And for those of you who were watching, I'm sure you guys were like, gosh, I hope we get to our pick and we actually pick, just not because of them knowing that they might trade it, but because of just how long the draft is. And yeah, they traded the pick. Honestly, it doesn't surprise me at all. And this is the type of draft where heading into it, it wasn't a star-studded draft. It wasn't like the draft where we actually drafted in the first round to get Bradley Nadeau, but we traded back with Chicago for their 34th pick and their I think it was the 62 pick and a 5th round pick in 2027. So honestly, I think if you just look at these trades, in of itself, I think they're very good trades because I do agree with the philosophy that a lot of these general managers will say when it comes to picks. Think of these picks as darts on a dartboard. The more picks you have, the more darts you have at hitting that bullseye. So basically the chance, obviously. So again, I'm not complaining with these trades. Now, I did give you guys, if you guys remember the episode of me previewing the draft, there were quite a few guys where I was hoping Hurricanes would select. And I think the biggest thing to me wasn't so much the guys that I have selected, but the positions. Because if you looked at their current prospect pool, they mainly, I think, needed to replenish their center position and their goalie position. And I actually thought they did that really well. I'm going to get to that later in this episode with their selections. But I was a little bit nervous when they traded that pick because when they did trade that pick, it was during that time where they were calling out guys where I was like, man, I would love to have drafted Ravensburg or a couple other players that I had on my list. What's funny enough, for those of you who did not watch the Warning Takes live stream that night, it was so funny because Brandon, he had his own list of players that he would like the Hurricanes to take. And once we traded that pick, 3 of them in a row were taken off his list. And he just threw he threw out a huge F-bomb in frustration. And for those of you who don't know, I try not to cuss. That's just my personal thing. But I just thought it was really, really funny. But the Hurricanes, despite them trading down, they did trade down again, which I thought was the funniest thing because I was like, are they wanting to draft? But again, I think these trades are completely fine. I think they're good. Again, they're trying to get more draft picks. I understand it. But as a Kings fan, I do understand at the same time, like, are we ever going to draft? So I understand that position as well. But they did deal the 34th pick and the 189th pick to Montreal for the 41st and 49th pick. So they were able to get 3 second-round picks, which I would commend them. I think that was a pretty good job. And what's funny is they actually did trade up to the 67th pick from LA, and in exchange, Carolina had to give up the 125th pick and a 3rd round pick for next year's draft. I believe that was the Dallas's pick. I am not 100% certain, but I would say I'm probably 90% certain because I believe it was one of Dallas's picks that we got from the Rantanen trade. But I did think that was funny. We kept trading down. Oh, right. So, the first things first, the players, if you guys remember from the episode where I previewed the draft, came up with a list of players for you guys to know if you wanted to watch the draft that you had no idea about the players. But most of the players that I thought were going to go in the top 5 did go in the top 5. There were only a couple that didn't. But Matthew Schaefer, he was going to go number 1. I would have been shocked if he went below, but the Islanders did pick him at number 1. Wonderful. Canes having a divisional team getting a top pick. As a Canes fan, I do not like that, for the record. But the Islanders, they probably kind of needed it at the same time, even though it is another defenseman and they have a plethora of defensemen, even after trading Noah Dobson. But San Jose, they drafted Michael Misa. That to me wasn't a shock as well. It was number 3 where I thought things were going to get interesting with Chicago's pick, and they picked Anton Frendel. So those are 3 guys that I projected to probably be picked in the top 5, and they did. And then the other players that I picked in the top 5, I believe, were Porter Martone and James Higgins. They got drafted later. And for the record, I did not like Boston drafting Higgins because I think Higgins is actually a very good player. I think the reason why he dropped was because he was small. Regardless, though, I'm just not a big fan of Boston. That's kind of the reason why. But Utah, they picked up Caleb Denories, and Nashville, Brady Martin. I thought Brady Martin was a bit of a stretch, to be honest, from Nashville. Just a bit of a stretch. But regardless, those were the top 5. And now I am going to go through the Hurricane selections here. So the Hurricanes, with the 41st pick, they picked Semyon Frolov. And I was so happy that the Hurricanes picked a goalie because that was the position that they kind of needed to replenish. I would say probably the center position was first, to be honest. But regardless, they picked up a goalie in Frolov. And these are from words from, I believe, Williams. I believe from Williams, or it might have been Darren York. I think it was Darren York. But there were high praises of Frolov's pit play, and there was concern whether the Hurricanes were going to be able to draft them or not. So, for those of you who don't know, Frolov was ranked as one of the top 3 goalies in international scouting. So, that's really good. And I really hope Frolov can be a very, very good goalie for the Hurricanes. But at the same time, you look at all the positions that are being scouted, goaltending is the hardest position to scout because of how unpredictable goalies are. That's just the reality of the situation. So I hope Frolov gets to be a goalie. When I watched on ESPN on day 2, they did project Frolov to be a NHL goalie, like a 1A, 2B goalie. So I was happy to see that he was a little bit highly regarded as a goalie, not as a true starter, but again, you never know. That's just how goalies are. So the 49th pick was Charlie Serrato, and I thought this was a very interesting pick. And the reason why I thought it was probably the most interesting pick was because I thought that was kind of a. I'm not saying the Hurricanes did bad at drafting him because he really did have a great season with his team. College, I think he played in college. He played for Penn State. That's the college he played for. But if you guys want to know a little bit about him, Serrato is a bit of a late bloomer in this draft. He's 20 years old, so he got passed in the draft a couple times in the past. So if I was general manager, and I'm just being honest here, I probably wouldn't have drafted Serrato. But seeing the profile, honestly doesn't surprise me because the way the Hurricanes explained Toronto was a center, which is good because, again, the Hurricanes need centers. I think by that alone, the Hurricanes did pretty decent, but at the same time, I did think it was a bit of a stretch because of him getting passed in the draft the past couple times. But regardless, we'll see how he does. He's known to be a defensive type of center. So I'm sure Brendan Moore was happy that we drafted a player like that. The next player, and this is probably my second favorite player that we drafted, is Ivan Ryabkin. And this was a player that has actually fallen. What's interesting with this player, before this past season started, he was listed as a top 5 player coming into this draft. But there was concern with his work ethic and all that type of stuff. So that's why he took a big hit. And he was also really inconsistent. But this is a player that has all the skills necessary to compete in the NHL. It's just, does he have that work ethic to put them together? And I know there are probably people who see the selection be like, well, I'd rather have the work ethic than the skill. I would say you draft a guy like this anyways, because it really is just another dart at the dartboard. And you never know, he could put it together because he does have that natural ability to score. He is a player also too that's very, very physical. So knowing that as well, I was really happy the Hurricanes drafted a guy like him. So he's 5'11", so he's not the biggest guy, but he does play a very mean physical game. And I'm happy the Hurricanes drafted a guy like that. The next player the Hurricanes selected was the 67th pick, was Kurbin Limatov. I believe that's how you pronounce it. He's a defenseman, and that's the pick that the Hurricanes trade up to get. And he's a big defenseman, and it seems like the Hurricanes are a little bit high on him. So Hurricanes get a little bit deeper, I would say, in terms of their prospects on the defensive side of things. But you never know how he's going to turn out to be. At some point when it comes to the draft, like I've always thought, like rounds 1 through 3 are somewhat important. And I'm not saying rounds 4 through 7 aren't. It's just you're more than likely are going to get a miss on a player rounds 4 through 7. Like I'm not expecting like another Kirill Kaprizov because you don't see that often. That happens very rarely to see a player like Kaprizov getting drafted in the 7th round. It just doesn't happen. So with the 87th selection, Carolina, they did select Roman Bozov, another defenseman. He's big as well. Again, I'm happy the Hurricanes are drafting big guys because since they're drafting big guys, it does give me hope that the Hurricanes are actually kind of looking and at the same, like, you know what, we kind of do need to get bigger. Not saying that these players are going to be NHLers, but if they do become NHLers, it's going to be really good for us because they're big and you need big players on the ice. Look at Florida, for example. They're a big team. And while I don't think that's the sole reason why they won back-to-back Stanley Cups, it's definitely a big reason. So the next pick with the 183rd pick, they picked Viggo Nordlund, who I believe is a Swedish player. He's all offense. He's a winger, bit smaller. And then with their very last pick, 221st selection, Philip Ekberg, who I believe is Swedish as well. Could be wrong about that, but he's a pure offensive winger as well. So that's kind of it for the Hurricane selections in the past draft. If I were to give them a grade for just these picks alone, I would say they have done I would say, no, I'm going to give them an A. I am. I was leaning a little bit toward a B at first, but I'm going to lean toward an A because I feel like that they picked players that they kind of needed in the prospect pool, just because, again, a guy like Frolov, a guy like Ryopkin, Serrato, like you're thin at the center and goalie positions, and they were able to replenish that in this draft. So I consider that a win. I'm not saying these players are going to be NHLers by any means. I think the most likely player, if I were to say that, does become an NHLer. I'm going to lean toward Frolov. Some might lean toward Ryopkin, but again, at that point, you just don't know. You really don't. Hurricanes did not have a selection in the first round. And to be honest, I don't think there's that much of a difference between selecting late in the first round to picking pretty early in the second, just because of how this draft it has been constructed by scouts. So that's pretty much it for recapping the entry draft. There were a few surprises. There were a few teams trying. I know Utah was trying to get San Jose's pick. Elliot Friedman, he put that out there. Now, free agency day is going to be Tuesday. And for those of you who don't know, a couple things. I would say one thing has kind of taken news around the league with Mitch Marner. Because for those of you who don't know, seems like Vegas is the front runner. I believe I said this in the last episode, but do I expect Mitch Marner to come to Carolina? No, I really do not. But what's being reported right now from Elliot Friedman is that while Vegas might be the front runner, put a hold on that because the NHL, what they've been trying to do is cracking down on tampering. And because of that, if Marner signs with Vegas, Toronto could go to the NHL and be like, hey, look at this signing. This proves that Vegas has been tampering with Mitch Marner. And the word that Elliot Friedman has gotten from lots of GMs is the NHL is ready to show a team as an example for tampering and be like, see, this is why you should not do this because we're going to punish them harshly. So we'll see if that changes anything with Mitch Marner going to Vegas or doesn't. I think it could. And again, I said this in a previous episode before, but because of NHL cracking down on tampering, it's really hard to truly know where probably most of these players are going. Even Marner going to Vegas, you just never know. It all starts with one phone call. This is what Elliot Friedman would say. So it's going to be interesting. I think I heard early today that Friedman thinks Carolina is going to be pushing very, very hard on Ehlers. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe if Carolina sees the whole tampering thing between Marner and Vegas, maybe Carolina could be like, hey, maybe we actually have a chance here with Marner. I don't think Marner comes to Carolina, but if he does, I will be telling you, I will be dancing across the street. I really will, because Marner's a game changer, and you kind of need that. But listen, I know there are probably some fans that have hopes for free agency day. I don't know if the Hurricanes are going to be active or not. I really don't. Obviously, they had to sign someone because I believe they had to get to the cap floor. But regardless, like the entry draft, even though I thought it was very poorly executed, I like these big events in hockey. It's really, really fun. And second, I think regardless, the Hurricanes are going to get better at certain positions. I really do think it comes down to, I think they'd like to fill all three, but I think it really comes down to finding a player to pair with Slavin and finding a second line center, just because KK and Jankowski do not cut it to be a second line center. They just can't. And I think if they do sign someone with free agency, I think there's going to be a very, very strong likelihood that a current roster player is going to be traded, because you look at this team right now, they have already 12 forwards signed, probably, honestly, you count Scott Morrow, 6 defensemen, 2 goalies. This is a roster that's already set. So if they add 1 or 2 guys come free agency, there's definitely going to be a trade coming. There really is. So it's going to be very interesting to see what this Canes team does. Again, I was a general manager, I would see what you can find when it comes to free agency. I'm not saying they will, but let's say they sign Ellers and they sign Ekblad. Well, now you still have those Dallas picks, those Dallas first round picks, to possibly make a trade for a second line center. And plus, you probably have a couple extra players from those signings that you could probably trade to get a second line center as well. It's really all about asset management if you just look at it. So we'll see how the Hurricanes do come free agency. I am nervous. Trust me, I am. But at the end of the day, it's a sport, and I think it's going to be hopefully it's a fun day for Hurricane fans. But regardless, it's going to be fun for me just because I just, not only do I love the Hurricanes, but I love the sport in general. You guys probably know that. And again, I just want to thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day for listening to me talk about the Hurricanes. So, Hurricanes are a very passionate topic that I love to talk about. Really, really get to enjoy all you guys that are listening, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Apple, whether you're on Spotify. So, I really, really do appreciate it. And I will see you guys next Monday.